Hello, good evening. How are we all? So this evening I'm going live with Iman, who will be joining super soon. And we feel like it's really important to share some of the stories of the breakdowns to reach those breakthroughs, entering into some of those darker moments to reach the light, reach on the other side, break through and learn from some of these deep moments. Let me just get Iman in. You can tell I just can't multitask. It's like I'm in flow and then, technology, head. Always finding that balance between being in the mind, being in the body. Hello! Here we are. Just set my space for this, for the holding of this conversation. Should we just take a breath? Yeah. Just arriving here.
Feels so good to be here.
Yeah, I agree. Just saying hi to everyone joining, and yeah, I feel like the tone, like it's already coming through in just kind of my voice and in the way that I'm going to hold myself this evening, and you too, and holding space for each other. We're about to share, and I had some ideas stuff that I wanted to bring today, and I always just sit in my flow and what comes through, but those breakdowns, and I've recently had one, so it's kind of still very fresh in my mind, and I don't really know where to go with it or where to start with it. I don't know where it should, because it's such an opening, and this is what I was mentioning on my stories earlier as to why one to talk about and why we don't hear it enough, because such an intimate personal experience that we're moving through, that sometimes to put words to such experiences almost doesn't do the experience the justice as or the value that is moving through us, right? And so what I mean by that is those moments of despair, those moments, and I would call it despair, those moments of a complete shattering that has cracked open so the light is beaming into the shadows, and there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah. I think maybe where we start is actually in acknowledging that. I mean, this is a beautiful space for us to share this, but I can already feel the heaviness in what we're about to bring. And what's interesting is when I discuss, or when I think about, or when I talk about how I've moved through these moments, it's almost a reliving of those feelings, of those moments. And even as I say it now, I know I'm thinking about specific moments in my mind that I've had to really break down, and it's the energy of that is still here. It's still present, and I feel like that is what carries us through. That wound is the opening for the medicine, and that is what lives on with us. And so it's almost like every time you feel into it, you're still processing and feeling and moving into that space of breakthrough. I don't want this to be a very linear conversation in that this is the breakdown and then this is the breakthrough and bam, we're finished. It really never works like that. Every time we discuss these, every time we think about these, every time we feel into that experience, it's another reliving of it. It's another breakdown to breakthrough moment, just not as intense because we already did the really intense work the first time round. And there is such a beautiful honoring in that, acknowledging that every time we are moving even more into that light, opening our hearts even more, experiencing more compassion, more unconditional love, more light, because that's what this process is. It's moving you, shifting you from one space to another space. And then how can you do that even more?
Mm. Yeah. And what you were sharing there is, what I wanted to highlight is it is the work of the heart. This truly is the vulnerability and the workings of the heart. To the heart is that storage of all of our pain that we hold, and when we fall into the breakdown, it's really when we release that which is held in the heart, in this, like, if you can imagine it to be some kind of calcified, solidified, and you've just cracked it, and you're just seeping into the pain that we're holding in there to allow it to release and to move through us. And those moments do feel like a shattering because we've spent so long protecting that heart and keeping the the shell so tight, and there's only so much the heart can take. There's
Mm.
so much. And when we get triggered by it, could be something very simple, and this, I'm sure this has happened to many of us, like in relationships, and it's like someone didn't put the dishwasher on, right? And that can be that one bit that just digs right into the heart and cracks it open, and it's like, here, now look at all of this pain. And we can only go on for so long, and this
Mm.
is really the truth. When we work with the heart, you can only go on for so long if we're going to stay integral to the work of the heart. If we don't feel the pain and release that which is built up, then how can we give unendlessly love?
Yeah, yeah. And I really like this imagery of the heart being broken, as it were, but with broken so that it can let the shards of light through. That for me is always the imagery that I come back to, like a piece of pottery that you just broke, and they put the gold lines in. It's like these lines of light that really crack open the heart. And I feel like without that, we really cannot dive deep into what it is that we need to heal.
Mm.
Because as we hold on to those emotions in the heart, and I'm really feeling my heart space as I'm saying this, because it's always like a fear that I'm having in being so vulnerable right now and sharing these experiences. But without without truly feeling the pain, right? There is just absolutely no way you can move through it. There's just absolutely no way, because your heart will continue to hold it, and it will continue to be heavy on your heart, and it will continue to sit with you. But feeling it so deeply, right, allows you to process it, allows it to flow through you, allows it to move you into a different space. And we will all have our different ways of feeling it. It will look different to each of us. It will feel different for each of us based on our experiences and what it is that we're dealing with and how we move through spaces. But the feeling is so important. The feeling for me is really important. And that's a good place to start about my share, my I've had lots of sort of breakdown to breakthrough moments, but my biggest one happened about 2 years ago. It happened about 2 years ago, and I was dealing with the breakdown of a romantic relationship. And The pain that I held in my heart at the breakdown of that was intense, and I tried so hard not to feel it because I didn't want to. I knew it was going to be so much, and I didn't want to feel it. So I tried everything to keep protecting my heart so that it wouldn't do that crack open thing that I talked about. So one day I knew I just had to. I had to. So I took myself to a sort of retreat space in my own home, and I created this cocoon, this safe space cocoon for myself. And I took 10 days out from the world. No phone, no TV, no music, no nothing, just me, my journal, my thoughts, and some books. And I remember sort of offering a prayer up to God that day, and I was just kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm feeling this pain and I don't know what to do. And before I knew it, I had broken down in tears. And I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take the physical pain, because this is what people don't realize. Any emotion or energy that you hold on to in your body ends up becoming physical. It feels like a complete tearing apart of the body. It feels like a complete death, almost, right? And I remember bawling my eyes out and genuinely pleading. And that sounds really extreme, but that's what it was. It was almost like a pleading, a begging. Please take this pain away. Please take this pain away. And I journaled, and I was like, why am I feeling this way? I let the rage come through. The why are you doing this to me? Why is this my experience? I let the rage come through. I let the tears come through. I screamed. I begged. I broke down in the most typical, stereotypical way that I could think of at that time, and I let myself do it. And it was such a surreal experience because I watched myself do it. So it was like I was part of it, but also not part of it. So I was like watching myself doing this for at least an hour, just journaling, watching my tears fall onto the paper, being angry, and then just breaking down completely and just, why? Please help me. And that was, like, for me, the biggest thing. And after lots of please help me and pages of please help me in my journal, there was this specific moment of silence. And it was like nothing existed in that moment except this peace. And that peace came from the intense release.
Mm.
And even though it didn't last very long before the next wave of tears wanted to come through, it was all I needed in that moment to finally just know that I was accepting this. And I think that's part of this as well. It's the acceptance of what I'm going through. It's the compassion with which I can hold myself in that space. And it's the patience. And I needed to be patient with myself in that moment. And I'm not a big fan of time heals all wounds. Like, I'm not a big fan of that saying. I genuinely don't believe that. I feel like time helps to make you forget. But time in and of itself,
Catch emotionally so you can see it from a more neutral perspective. Yeah.
yeah, but time in and of itself isn't necessarily the healer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I knew something had shifted when I had that moment of silence, that moment of peace. And it's in that space that you are detached and that you can start to see things from that higher perspective of, well, what are the lessons, right? What can I take away from this? That why that I was asking, it's not a why me anymore. It's a how can I move through this now? How can I move through this? And what is this teaching me? What am I here to learn? And that's where you get the breakthrough. And I truly believe that breakthroughs can, like real breakthroughs, can only come from those breakdown moments. You can have aha moments, like a remembrance, and they're great, but breakthroughs, they they are genuinely, in my experience anyway, preceded by this very deep breakdown. And the breakdown isn't something to be feared, right? Like I went into that experience so resistant. I created it for myself because I created a safe space and I knew what I was doing. And I have the ability to hold myself and to move through those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, would that experience have looked different if I had been held? Yes, it would have, right? And that's the beauty of being able to hold space for each other and to do this work in space and to do this work with guidance and with healers and in sisterhood or in brotherhood or in mixed circles or however we do it. But it's just that experience can be so different because even though I witnessed myself, imagine how powerful it would have been to have been witnessed. To have been witnessed in my vulnerability the way I was just now witnessed in my vulnerability. That is so much more powerful as an experience for you and the people witnessing. I think I'm going to stop there and invite you to hold that and invite everybody on this call to hold that.
I want to say thank you for that share, for opening your heart in this space to take yourself back to that moment and what that felt like. Because even when we speak about these times, you know, as we reflect, there's a part of us that is remembering that feeling of despair, and you're going there, and I felt that. So thank you. And I'm just going to take a moment to just recenter. Like I mentioned, I didn't really come with specific because there are so many that I break down. And it's all the breakdowns are always triggered by another. And I think this is also super important how, like, the relationships and connections, this is how we learn, this is how we grow. I could sit in these four walls and do all the work I possibly want to do in here and be safe and cocooned, and then I go out only to be shattered and only to be faced with, oh, all that work you were doing in your safe space, in your four walls. Mm-mm. Like, now you got to go out there and put that into practice, and that's always the hardest part. Um, so what I want to share, mm, it's relationships again for me. Um, the realization I had when I very much began this opening or this journey back to myself, and when I had this download from spirit almost saying you need to reconnect, and I never knew what that meant. I was like, what do you mean I feel connected? But what I realized, and it was such a deep shattering to come to this truth about self, when you have an idea of who you think you are and what you think you do things for. And when there's a realization, when you realize actually you're just feeding a wound, or you're distracting yourself from seeing the darker truths of who you are. And for me, that was much, I have always been in relationships from a very young age, like over and over again, one to the next to the next. And the realization and real breakdown moment for me was knowing that I did that out of self-abandonment, out of a devaluing of my existence, and that much easier to focus on the pains and to be there for someone else than to even acknowledge that I have a life too, that I so living for me and not living just for the sake or for the service of others. And when I realized this truth, firstly, there was everything made sense. Firstly, everything made sense. But there was a grieving. I was grieving the times where I had chose others over me, and not because I consciously chose it, but because I didn't think I could be chosen. I didn't think I could choose me. So to sit in that, and there's so much that comes with this, right? When you have one realization, it's like there's more to it. You start remembering the first moments that this ever happened. Like, where did it stem from? Oh, I was abandoned as a child. I felt like this, and this is what we're sitting with in the breakdown. Like in that moment, it was everything was coming to me. Remembering like childhood moments where I didn't receive the emotional love, where I was the mediator in my parents' relationships, and then suddenly spiraling into how the patterns were playing out in my relationships that I was having, and where I was mirroring, where I was operating from a programming of what I thought love was, and a completely elusive shattering of love, of I understood love to be I have to be there for another, and then I will be loved. Then I will feel loved when I give all of myself in whatever capacity that looks like, emotionally, physically, all of it. I'll just give everything, and then when I receive that smile of acknowledgement of me burned out, then that's love, you know? Like, even just thinking of that, and the twist and the turn, and how you have to sit in and own, and this is really a part of it. It's like no one made me do that, and part of that break is accepting the accountability of I fucking did that. I did that. I got to sit with me doing that. And this is something I always look at, because it's so easy to just blame someone else. And I was doing it. I was doing it all throughout those relationships, staying in them, blaming them. Your fault. Your fault. You did this. You did this to make me feel this. You did this to make me feel. So that breakdown moment, it was like a catalyst to understanding my relationship patterns and how I show up for others. And I'd had enough. There was a part of me that realized, through the acceptance of owning that I chose all of that, I had such low self-esteem and low self-worth that I chose to do those things in those relationships because I believed, and deeply ingrained believed, that I couldn't give that to myself. I couldn't choose me. Someone had to choose me. Someone had to give that to me. That was all from outside of me. But the power in owning and taking the accountability of that, allowed me to go, hey, I do have a choice now. I have a choice in how I want to treat myself. I have a choice in how others treat me. But in order to have that, I start treating myself like the queen I deserve to be treated. And maybe tying that then to my inner child on how she didn't have the time or the space or the regulated nervous system to value herself. She didn't have that. She was too busy sorting out being superwoman, thinking that was her role and holding on to that identity and then carrying that with me and never acknowledging and thanking her for all that she took on out of love
Mm.
and how that built pain because there was an abandonment. So it's like these breakdowns are not, like you were saying at the beginning, it's not like, oh yeah, like that's the thing that caused me to break down. Yes, maybe that one thing was enough to trigger the breakdown, but it's all of the threads of truth that come to that. And then what is the deeper root here? So for me in this story was the abandonment, the self-abandonment. That was the deeper root. And then the breakthrough is then making those choices. Okay, I was abandoning myself. Okay, how can I now show myself, show my child, because a lot of this is inner child work. How can I show her the acknowledgement that she never, and that's when the self-love comes in and all the process that comes with that. And it's just a constant. This is a constant. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Francesca.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it into the space. Because, I mean, feel free to comment in the chat about this, but I know me and you say that we're reflections of each other in a lot of ways, but hearing you speak is very much a reflection of my own wounding, of my own pain and of my own trauma. It comes from that place of abandonment where I didn't know how to choose self. And I think what's really important to acknowledge is that actually a lot of us are mirrors for each other. A lot of us will share the same or similar wounding, and a lot of us will have very similar trauma triggers for those breakdowns. But how often is that experience shared and guided? And I feel like when you've been through so many of those and been able to come out the other end, and there is always a coming out at the other end, there is always this acceptance and acknowledgement of the pain and the wounding and the trauma, and then the sort of self-responsibility and accountability that ignites that breakthrough moment. When you are sort of guided into those spaces by people who have been there and done that, that work can look and feel so much more powerful. And I think it's important for people to have that support in those spaces so that it doesn't feel like you're carrying the burden completely on your own. So that people can actually be mirrors for you so that you can see where you might need to do some accountability,
Mm.
Like where you might need to show that part of self some love, where you might need to acknowledge that inner child. Because as you held up that mirror for me and for some others on this call, I'm like, yeah, I felt that. I felt that because that was also me. That inner child wounding, that abandonment, that not choosing self, that shattering of love, that not really understanding love, right? Not really understanding love.
Yeah, but I don't know, something was coming through as you were sharing that around not understanding love. And I think coming from the purity of a space of understanding that everything is love, when the pain comes through or when the reality of certain situations hit and it doesn't feel like love, that in itself is a shattering, because we're coming from a place of purity and always wanting to give love, just be love. But there's a conditioning around the giving aspect and taking ourselves out of the equation. And if we are just radiating love, where do we then cultivate that in for ourselves? And I think that's where a lot of this has come from, of just seeing so much pain in the world, from a young age. And it's like, oh, but I'm radiate that love. I can be the love here. I can give it. I can be it. And that's beautiful and it's pure. But there's also understanding the dark elements to both sides, like duality of everything, right? The can't just be the giver.
Yeah. And it's funny because as you were sharing that, in my mind, I was like, there is duality to so much of what we experience here on Earth, and I'm very much of the view that that is part and parcel of why we come to Earth, actually, to experience that beautiful duality that this space has to offer us. And actually then coming back to, if all the experiences are chosen, then you get to choose how you give meaning to them,
Yeah.
what emotion you want to attribute to them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, everything is this beautiful experiment or test, if you like, of how can I come back to that truth of who I am? How can I come back to my center, that center being love, that truth being love? How can I come back to that oneness, that unity
Mm-hmm.
that I feel? And really, the experience of that has to be in the form of doing the work, but also testing it out, experimenting with it out in the real world, right? Because how will I know where I'm at? How will I know how far I've moved along this game that I'm playing? What level am I on now? How will I know that if I don't continually try to expand? And for me, that triggering is this beautiful expansion. It's the expansion that we get to experience, to be able to let more love in, to be able to let more light in. And then when we understand how to let it in for ourselves and really just hold it there, we're giving from a completely different space to giving from a space of lack, of abandonment, of validation, of permission. So it's a beautiful expansion. Like, I want to emphasize more than anything, like, those experiences can look painful, can feel painful, and that invitation to pain is real. But the suffering doesn't have to be. The suffering is very much a choice.
Yeah.
But also, pain doesn't have to be negative, and it's not something to be feared. If you see pain as an invitation for expansion and for opening up of the heart, how wonderful would it be when you step into that space?
Mm.
When you truly allow yourself to just feel it and almost test the boundaries when you're in it. That can I push this a little bit more today? Can I open this space up a little bit more today? Or is today not the day? And it's okay if today isn't the day,
Mm.
right? There's beautiful awareness that comes with realizing where you're at, but also a beautiful realization of where you want to be. And this is where I come back to that patience thing. It's allowing ourselves to be patient with ourselves. I don't have to be there right now. Today might not be my day where I push that and I test that. Today might be a day of contraction for me, and I can sit in that, and that's okay. But I will move from that space, and that movement is important. So I need to be able to move from that space, because the movement is what then brings through the breakthrough.
Yeah, very much the invitation to I'm saying walk into it, right? Lean into the pain, and the suffering only comes in and remains if there is an attachment to the pain. And when we release the pain, or release the suffering that is attached to the pain, we can see past it and just understand it as an emotion. Because, emotions are all new. We give meaning to them. And
Mm,
what is so important to understand, that they are, just like you were saying, the movement. If we move through it, we allow ourselves to move through them. It's the attachment that always causes all of the suffering. And it's like it feel into the pain of a traumatic memory, for example. Yeah. If you're allowing the mind to attach itself to that memory in a victimization state of why me, right? In the pain that you're in. But if there is the attachment to that trauma as your identity, that's where the suffering will remain. That is where the will continue to stay, and there is no release happening, because hold on, you've attached the trauma to your identity and who you are and how you show up in the world.
mm,
That is still keeping yourself in imprisonment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's why, very much so, this feeling aspect is important, because that is the way we process. That is the way you stop holding onto things. You must release them, you must let them go. And part of that in this work is to feel them, So a lot of us will show up from very wounded spaces and hold on to very wounded identities. And a lot of us actually, I've said this before to clients actually, sometimes that pain is safe. Sometimes that pain is our safety,
Yeah.
because it is all we know. It is our entire experience. And
Mm.
so actually moving outside of that, we don't even know what that looks like. So sometimes to sit in the pain, even though it looks and feels painful, and people will acknowledge that, it's actually safe, because I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. And trying to move from that space can just be too difficult because it's unknown for me. That rebirth moment, I don't know who she's going to be. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what that's going to feel like. That rebirth moment, that's too scary for me right now. Let me sit in death because I know what that feels like. I know what that looks like, and that is safe.
Mm, mm, mm,
Right?
mm.
But what if I let myself move into that unknown space and allowed myself to rebirth? Who would that person be? How would that person move? Fuck, I want to find out. Like, I want to find out. So I do the work because I want to find out. I want to find out. Because for me, life's too short. I want to live as that person, even if it feels unsafe sometimes. Let me make it safe. Let me give her safety. Let me create the safety for her to be rebirthed.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's really powerful when we do this work in sacred space together.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have the capacity to give myself safety in that moment, I know Francesca's got me. I know Francesca will create that container for me to rebirth in safety.
Mm.
And that's what we'll be doing for a lot of these women in our retreat,
Oh, yeah.
giving them the capacity and the safety for them to rebirth through their wounds, move through their pains, transform them, transmute them, transcend them into a more aligned, more centered, more
Mm.
moved. That doesn't even make sense, but everybody knows what I mean. Um, just to move from that place of alignment with who we truly are,
Mm.
and really not forgetting that.
Yeah. And as you're moving through all of that, I just keep hearing trust, 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 because trust is the key word to embody, to be able to move through the unknown, trusting that you are going to be okay on the other side. And if not, damn better, you know, and it's part of the evolution of the soul. And there's a trusting in that process to know that that she's got you, a higher self. You've bought it. You've been got. I don't know why I want to say that, but I want to say you've been got. Like, um, and just the trusting element, because what we fear so much is another shattering. You know, we fear that the unknown is going to
Mm,
be another place of pain, because that we're coming at it from a place of pain.
mm,
So all we can understand is that unknown is even worse. But to sit and trust and just open yourself to the perspective shift of, okay, this is how I'm feeling now, and you really feel into the pain, whatever's going on, whatever's moving through you, and you're sitting with it. Can you trust that on the other side of pain is love? Can you trust that on the other side is a new opportunity, is a space to change? And you mentioned in that true alignment with not just the identity that we hold ourselves of, but of our spirit that is taking us and guiding us along. And we really must feel and fall into the two worlds. We must, and especially where we are in the planet now, we really must fall into the place of both worlds, understanding that we are divinely supported and guided, and we will make it through. And the more that we're in spaces with like-minded people like ourselves, those that have the capacity hold ourselves, we can hold others. You know, this is also very important. Um, so when we are in those spaces, it gives us even more permission. And I was sharing a post earlier today around the shame of all these feelings that we have. There's almost a shame that we hold pain, you know, and also one thing I really want to fall into is the comparison of trauma that creates shame, where you feel like your trauma might not be as severe as somebody else's trauma. And I really just want to crash that, because it's your experience, and any trauma that has happened to you is just as important as anything else. And so please, let's stop the trauma comparison, because that in itself is a holdback from entering the shadow and entering into it.
That's a really beautiful point. Thank you for bringing that to this space, Francesca. And also just to touch on Remus's comment that I can see here, it takes courage to trust the process. Absolutely. And I think what's really important as well is once you've been through one shattering experience, using that as a reference point to be able to trust that I got through this one. If there's another one coming, bring it on. Because if my soul is guiding me into these spaces,
Yeah.
then something higher than myself, something more aware than myself, knows that I got this. I can move through this. And that gives you the courage to be able to trust the process, because something bigger than yourself has led you here. Something knows it's in your highest good. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, everyone that's joined and tuned in, and you know, taken whatever resonated for you in this share. Maybe allowed you to tap into your space of courage and your heart. And that's what we're all here, moving through from a heart-centered place. No one said it's easy, but it's beautiful, and it's
Totally worth it.
truth, and it's living, and it's what we're here for. If we were on this earth to just numb out, well, you know, where's the life? And the truth, there can be so much joy in this, because the moment we've burst that through, there's joy. You know, then I want to laugh. I'm like, oh, like that happened, and it's fun, and it's funny. You know, that's a hilarious thing. After it all, can actually be light-hearted after, once it's been moved through, processed, integrated. You know, there's a process, but
Yeah.
let's
But
invite.
you're able to do that because it's been lifted from you, it's been shifted from you. And so that lower, you know, at the beginning of this conversation, Francesca, me and you were like, no one's going to see me do my hands like this, but we were like down here. Okay, like the energy was heavy.
Yeah, so
But through this conversation, we have shifted the energy, we have lifted it off ourselves. And you know, you can tell a lot by the way people speak, and the energy that comes, energy comes through very much through tone of voice, and obviously words, but through tone of voice, and it tells a lot. And you know, through this conversation, the energy has shifted, and it's a physical representation and manifestation of what we can do, what each of us can do when we transform, transmute, transcend those heavier experiences, those sort of lower vibrational energies. But you know, I am very much a believer of this is what it is to live, because you know, we are souls, beings, we are infinite beings having this beautiful beautiful human experience. And what does it mean to be human? You know, like just breaking down the words, like hue, if we spelt it Hue, that gives us so much variety and so much expansion to be able to experience. And I just feel like it is a beautiful thing to feel, and it is part of the human experience to feel. So let us feel the spectrum of emotions that are on offer, that are available to us. Because this is part of what life is. This is part of what the human experience is. So yeah, lean into it, experience it to the fullest, and allow yourself to be supported.
Mm.
Allow yourself to be supported, I think, is one of the messages I really want to sort of leave this space with, because I lean on you, and I know, you know, we have this beautiful mutual exchange of leaning on each other when we are experiencing or moving through things. And, you know, utmost gratitude to you for that, and to everybody on this call who has sat with us through this. But allowing yourself to be supported, actually going back to that comment from Remus, is courage too. It's courageous to allow yourself to be supported by somebody, because it requires you to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So thank you to everybody for allowing us to be courageous as we shared our vulnerable stories today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And Iman, I just want to also just take an acknowledgement for you, because you've been a big part in showing me that, in sh- that it's okay to be supported. So I just want to honor that. Wow. I didn't cry this whole time, which is amazing, but now I want to cry.
Let it out.
um, yeah, wow. I don't even know how to end this, because we have just shifted so much just through speaking, and we forget that it's so important to use our voice and to share our voice and allow ourselves, like you said, to be supported. And it's just in that alone, like, I feel lighter, I feel joyous, and I'm just really excited for life, to, you know, this, to know now what living is in this moment. I'm loving it. I'm here on the pendulum, swinging from side to side, and into my center, and it's like, we, like, I just love riding these waves, because I know that there's a greater purpose. And I really do want to say my motto, because I just feel like it's so important. Like, just hold the vision and ride the wave. That is just life in general. And pain is part of that. Anger is part of that. All those emotions, like, oh, let's see them all. And I love the human. Oh my God, not heard that one before. Freaking loved it. So, um, thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone. I don't know if anyone has any questions before we pop off.
We do have a question, Francesca, so I'm going to invite you to take this one if you'd like. From Official Sweet Pea, you did share how you moved through. How do you get to the other side?
How how you got to the other side. Mm. So it's a process of, once I've in that breakdown space of then putting all the pieces together, the threads are coming through. The breakthrough moment is the acknowledgement and acceptance and the owning of the accountability, all of that. And then moving on the other side is knowing that I now have a choice to change that. I now have a choice and know how I can show up differently so that I can break those patterns. So it's part of, it's, once you've hit the breakthrough, it's then putting that into practice. And we were mentioning it in some of the conversations. It's like, how can we be practical about that, and how that can then re-trigger again and spiral into more. And it's a constant process. There is just such a constant process with all of this work, and it's not one to the other. And we mentioned at the very beginning, it really isn't. It's, the breakthrough is a realization of a reclaiming of power, that I now have the choice to change that, you know? And then how that looks, depending on situations, is very different. How that looks with current people in your life, because that's always the hardest part, right? We can go out in the world and meet a load of new people and show up however we want in new connections and rewrite our story in that way. And beautiful, we can easily do that. But the real work is then how we can take what we want to learn, what boundaries need to be put in place with people that known us from a much older perspective, right? From that expectation of who they've already seen us to be and how we've shown up in that relationship for them. Um, that's the hardest part, I find personally. But so how do you get to the other side? You stay committed. Yeah.
I really like your reclamation of power, because for me that's very much what it's about. It's recognizing that I had the power all along and I chose to give it away for various reasons in various spaces in various ways. But when you do have that breakdown moment and you're in that space and you're pulling all the threads together and you're understanding things, and suddenly you're having those moments of awareness, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna take this. And it's that intentional, purposeful, conscious commitment that I'm gonna make to choose different, because I've always had the choice. It's almost it goes back to that Maya Angelou saying that I love, you know, when you know better, do better. And now that I know that I can choose differently and how I want to choose, it's a commitment to keep choosing, knowing that I will be tested along the way. But how can I keep choosing? How can I deepen that choice? How can I bring more of that choice into this space? How can I honor that choice? And in honoring that choice, honoring me. So always bringing it back to self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But thank you for your question, Official Sweet Pea.
Thank you. Hmm. So let's close this. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everybody here, and thank you to you, beautiful Francesca.
You, Emma. Bye.